Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today on how to level up your tabletop exercises. My name is Alyssa Pugh. I am the GRC content manager for Tandem. I've been with the company for just over 12 years now, and I am so excited to be here today to share some practical tips on how to host an outstanding tabletop exercise. Before we get started, just a quick disclaimer, this presentation is for information only. It contains my own opinions and it is proprietary. And a few housekeeping items. This session does have audio and video. If all you can see is the PowerPoint, well, you'll still get the same great information, just not my face. At the end of the session, give us your feedback and you might just win an Amazon gift card. The slides, recording, and certificate of attendance will be sent to you via email after the session. And finally, please interact with us today. We do have over 400 people registered, so we'll get to as many questions as we can during our time. But if we don't get to your question during the webinar, we will follow up later via email. This webinar is hosted by Tandem, a cybersecurity governance, risk management, and compliance application by Conetrix. We help businesses like yours manage and improve their security with our suite of web apps for things like business continuity planning, incident management, and more. We have been around since 2008, and we currently provide services to more than 1,800 financial institutions in all 50 states. So enough about us. We would also love to get to know you. So we have a couple poll questions during our time today, and I would love for you to participate. And I know everybody else on the call would as well. So up first, what type of organization do you currently work for? Let me go ahead and launch that poll. Our answer options here are going to be bank, credit union, other financial institutions. So if you work for a mortgage, trust, investment company, one of those, third-party service provider, and other. And if you choose other, leave us a comment. Let us know where you're from. All right, it looks like we've got about 75% voted, so I'm going to close that and share those results with you. It looks like about half of us are from banks today, and a little over a third are from credit unions, and then on out from there. All right, thank you guys so much for sharing. My next poll question for you is, if you work for a financial institution, what is your organization's asset size? So our options here are less than 250 million, 250 to 500 million, 500 million to a billion to 5 billion, and more than 5 billion. All right, and we are seeing a nice little bell curve showing up here today. It's a little bit of a lopsided bell curve, but it's still a bell curve. Okay, I'm going to close that and share those results with you as well. So most of us are in the 1 billion to 5 billion range, and then on out from there. So thank you all so much for sharing wherever you find yourself. I hope we have something helpful for you today. So for our agenda today, I want to talk with you about tabletop exercises. Then for the main course, I want to give you 5 tips for your tabletop to help improve your experiences and your results. And then to put what we learn into practice, we are actually going to do a mini tabletop exercise, the cherry on top, if you will. I can hear you saying, how exactly are we going to do that? Stay tuned. I'll give you details as we get there. So to kick things off, I want to start by introducing this idea of tabletop exercises. What even is a tabletop? So according to the FFIEC, tabletop exercises, and I'm just going to quote this here, sometimes referred to as walkthrough, it's a discussion during which personnel review their BCP-defined roles and discuss their responses during an adverse event simulation. So this is very BCP specific, but you can replace BCP with incident response plan, and that sentence is still true. A tabletop exercise is one way to help make sure your security and resilience plans are ready. Now, I am not going to read this full slide to you, so you can bookmark it for a rainy fall day. All 4 of the major cybersecurity frameworks also encourage tabletop exercises, simulations, tests, drills, whatever word you want to put in there in one way or another. Now, I share this with you because I think it goes to show that tabletop exercises are a widely accepted and encouraged part of business continuity planning, incident response planning, and overall cybersecurity strategy. And again, we will be sending out the slides via email in a few business days. So what does a tabletop exercise look like? Most tabletops follow a structure that's going to look like this. You decide to have a tabletop, then you plan the logistics and pick your scenario. You invite people to join, you host the exercise, and then you document results and follow up and improve. And then you put it all away in a dusty box until next year, right? Well, it doesn't always go perfectly like this. Sometimes our tabletops are a little bit messy. Sometimes, let's be honest, our tabletop exercises feel a bit like the dinner scene from The Incredibles, right? You're Mrs. Incredible. You're doing your best to make sure all the right things happen. Meanwhile, you're trying to get your IT people and your ops people, make sure they're all getting along. Meanwhile, you're trying to make sure that your PR people and legal people stay happy and awake. Meanwhile, maybe you are hollering at Bob, the executive, to engage and do something. And maybe Bob does do something and it ends up disrupting the whole meeting, right? It can be a little crazy and chaotic. And let's not even talk about what happens when your board or examiners come knocking. If this feels like your tabletops, you are not alone. At Tandem, we often ask about pain points on our session surveys, and tabletop exercises seems like the song that never ends. So I would like to ask you, what are your biggest challenges with tabletop exercises? And you can feel free to select all that apply here. Our answer options are going to be creating a realistic scenario, getting the right people involved, managing timing and scheduling, running an engaging session, or other. And if you choose other, let us know. What else do you struggle with when you're doing a tabletop exercise? All right, since this one requires a few more clicks, I'll give you a few more seconds. And we are going to close that poll and share those results. All right, it looks like most of us are saying that we struggle with running an engaging session and creating a realistic scenario, but I'm going to be honest, those are a lot closer than I thought they would be, all four of those options. So I appreciate you guys and I appreciate your honesty. If you have ever struggled with hosting an effective tabletop exercise, welcome and take heart. You know, sometimes a few small tweaks are all it takes to make a big improvement. And so that's what I hope we can do today. So let's get into it. 5 tips for your tabletops. What are some real tangible things you can do to improve engagement and results? The first tip I have for you today is design a compelling scenario. And I use the word design very purposefully. When it comes to designing a compelling scenario, there are 3 things that you'll need. The first thing that you're going to need is a threat. And the reason that you need a threat is because a threat is what makes your tabletop relevant. A threat ties the scenario directly to your organization's actual risks. You are not inventing something random. You are anchoring it to a real plausible thing that can happen. This is why most people start with a threat when they're creating a scenario. Think a fire, a phishing email, a ransomware attack, a zombie apocalypse, if that's more your flavor. Now, the mistake I've seen people make is that they stop there. Just like in the game of Clue, you don't win by saying it was Colonel Mustard. You have to determine it was Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the candlestick. And if you don't know what a conservatory is, you're not alone there either. So the second part of a strong scenario is a current event. And the reason that you need a current event is that it makes your scenario realistic. It mirrors what's happening in the world right at this very moment. It may sound simple, but it really adds a sense of immediacy and a sense of credibility to your tabletop exercise because you're talking about something that could happen to you. You are putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but hopefully not literally. No one wants to be a shoe thief. So the last thing that I would encourage you to do is pick a specific business process for your scenario. And the reason that you need a business process is because this is what makes your scenario relatable. It connects this way out there concept to something that your people actually do day to day. So instead of saying, we had a fire, say the marketing team was trying out a new conference setup and the fidget spinner caught fire during the TikTok dance, right? All of a sudden, you've got a lot of buy-in from the marketing team and most of Gen Z. So I say all of this in a lighthearted way, but if you can create a scenario that has these 3 elements, that's one way to turn an exercise from something that's abstract to something that's actionable. So let's walk through an example of what this could look like. Let's pick a threat like we'll say social engineering. I feel like social engineering kind of comes in waves, and we are currently seeing a new wave via deepfakes, and specifically deepfakes that impersonate someone in a senior level role at an organization. If you haven't seen these news stories, just give it a quick search and you'll see what I mean. And so for our business process, let's go ahead and pick payment processing, because nobody ever picks on the payments team at a financial institution, right? This scenario practically writes itself. Let's say an attacker researched your company. The attacker found some fancy details about a business deal and then decided to use that information to attempt a fraudulent wire transfer. The CEO is publicly active on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, so the attacker got a few minutes of audio, turned it into a deepfake voice, and then called the payments team pretending to be the CEO. The attacker quickly mentioned something about, I need to transfer $250,000 to the joint account that we're setting up for this business deal, and it needs to be done yesterday. And the payments processing team just really wants to be helpful. So they initiate the transfer and the money's gone. And there's your scenario. It's not a complicated one, but here is the secret that I wish everyone knew. You don't always need it to be. Sometimes, yes, there is a time for shutting off the power and disabling your network connections just to make sure that things are going well. But more often than not, you just need to make sure that your foundational policies, procedures, plans, training, those kinds of things are accurate and effective. And a simple scenario like this would be a great way to do just that. Now, when it comes to creating a strong scenario, a question we get asked regularly is, can I conduct BCP and incident response tabletops at the same time? Short answer is maybe. Tabletops are meant to test how well your plans work, and sometimes a scenario can cover both. Your BCP is about answering the question, how can we continue to operate in adverse circumstances? And your incident response plan is more about answering the question, how are we going to detect, respond, and recover from an incident? So if there's a scenario where you can answer both of those questions, that's great. But just to mention, even if you do exercise both your BCP and incident response plan at the same time, your auditors and your examiners may still expect to see separate documentation and lessons learned for each of the plans. So if you do a 2-for-1 tabletop, be prepared to explain how both plans were improved. All right, so tip number 2 for leveling up your tabletop, gather the right team. When you have a tabletop exercise, who do you invite? Here are a few places to get started. As a general rule, you'll want to invite the people who have a role to play or who can contribute something meaningful. So I want to tell you a story as an example. This is actually based on a true story. It has been embellished for dramatic effect and names have been changed to protect the innocent. But once upon a time, there was a tabletop exercise, and the conductor of the exercise asked a question along the lines of, when such and such hypothetical scenario happens, who is the first person you contact? Well, the tabletop group looked around at each other, and then finally someone said, well, we'll call Steve. Steve, great, clocked it. So once Steve is aware of the issue, who is responsible for taking care of the next step? Well, that's Steve's job. Steve's job, right, not Steve Jobs. So once Steve has done the next part, who is responsible? Well, okay, so Steve handles that too. Okay, and remind me, which one of you is Steve? Steve's not here. Oh, yikes, right? So the moral of this story is stop talking about Steve behind his back. If Steve is your BCP, if Steve is your incident response plan, it would be an excellent idea for Steve to be at your tabletop exercises. So now that we've got Steve, who else should be invited to your tabletop? Well, when I was doing some surveying, I found that it really broke down into 2 groups of people who can make it more interesting. One is people inside the business, and 2 is people outside the business. I know, right? Really groundbreaking stuff here, but stay with me. When we are talking about people inside the business who get invited to a tabletop, that often looks like your IT and cybersecurity people, your risk management people, and your operations people, right? But what if the scenario results in a situation with a volatile employee? Well, you'd probably want to engage HR at that point. What about negative comments on social media? Well, you'd probably need marketing involved. What about if your lending or mortgage records got breached? What if your organization needs to make a very public statement? What if your customer service team is taking calls from angry customers or the media about the incident? It sounds silly, but this is a very real thing that happens. When the bank failures happened just a few years back, a couple years back, it all runs together, I'm not gonna lie. I heard stories of community banks who said that their phones were ringing off the hook with customers wanting to make sure their money was safe. You get the idea. Obviously, not everyone at your organization would need to be involved in every scenario. But if you are looking to level up your tabletop exercises and expand your impact, I think it can be important to remember that when a cyber incident or a business disruption happens, it's everyone's problem. So everyone can and probably should be part of the solution. Okay, so that's inside the business. What about people outside the business? Have you ever thought about inviting your board members to participate? So if getting buy-in from management on cybersecurity initiatives is a challenge, it might be helpful for them to see firsthand how the cookies are made, so to speak. Also, everybody loves a good 2-for-1. So based on the content you cover, you could also document this as a cybersecurity training exercise for your board members. Win, 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 right? So what about inviting someone from one of your third parties or your managed service provider? Well, if these are the people who are managing your IT, it would probably be very helpful to get their perspectives on your BCP and incident response plans. What about an insurance breach coach? During an incident, many insurance companies want to be your first outside call, and if they aren't, you can run the risk of forfeiting your coverage. So what about law enforcement? Someone like the FBI or Secret Service, or maybe emergency response. So if you're doing a tabletop exercise over a fire, it might be helpful to have someone from the fire department on hand for questions. One that I would definitely recommend is having a consultant sit in on your tabletop exercise, because not only do they bring a unique perspective, but they can bring other people's perspectives to the tabletop too. You know, here's how I've seen other similar banks or credit unions do this. Now, there are a lot of people who could have a say in your tabletop exercise, and I get it. This might sound like a lot of extra work, but let's pump the brakes for just a second. These are just ideas. This is not a mandatory guest list. You don't need to invite the entire Avengers lineup to your tabletop. Trust me, nobody wants their tabletop shut down for noise complaints. I'm just saying, bringing in a few of these folks can really level up your tabletop exercise and turn it into something great. So that begs the question, how many people should I have at my tabletop? That's a great question. This is going to be the shortest answer of the day. Research shows that the most productive meetings, or tabletops, include 5 to 8 people. So aim for like 6, 7. Any fewer, and you might miss out on key information that you need, and any more, and you might run the risk of participants disengaging. So 5 to 8, that's the goal. And make sure one of them takes good notes. The third tip I want to share with you is schedule strategically. Basically, timing is everything, literally everything. No pressure. So what do I mean by that? Well, first, just generally speaking, I mean schedule your tabletop exercise for 1 to 2 hours max. Any shorter and you're likely to not get into the details enough, but any longer and people might disengage or dread future tabletops because it's a big time commitment. If your participants know this isn't going to take up an entire day, and if you stick to your plan, that really helps ensure focus during your tabletop's scheduled window. Now, as you are scheduling, I'm also going to encourage you to check participant calendars. When you are booking a tabletop exercise, you don't want this to be the meeting that pushes their fullest calendar week of the year over the edge. I heard a story recently where a company leader said he never wanted to be involved again in an annual meeting. And it turns out that that is not really what he meant. What he meant was that this year's annual meeting got scheduled at a really bad time for him, and he was dreading it because of that. I share this story to encourage you to be kind with your bookings and be considerate of participant calendars when you are scheduling your tabletops. On this topic of timing, another question we often receive is, how often should I do tabletops? Well, the short answer is it depends. Most organizations try to perform tabletops annually, but it can vary based on business needs like changes in technology or personnel. So if you're asking how often do other people perform tabletop exercises, you've come to the right place. On Tandem's State of Cybersecurity survey this year, we asked more than 300 people who work for community financial institutions how often they perform BCP exercises and tests. A little over half of them are doing these tabletop exercises annually, but really interesting fact is that that number has dropped 12% since last year. What I hope that this graph shows you is that there is a time and a place for every flavor of exercise. If you want to go all out, the 5-course, everyone in the room, once a year tabletop extravaganza, absolutely go for it. But if your vibe is more girl dinner with crackers and cheese cubes and a few of your closest friends, that's awesome too. It's a tabletop either way. The point is not how fancy your tabletop exercise is, because both can be nutritious and delicious. The goal is to pick a frequency that works for you. And just as a pro tip, put that into your exercise and test plan that gets approved by the board so that they're in on it too. All right, the fourth tip I have for you is be a great host. Cue the dancing candlesticks in the conservatory. I've got a few ideas for you here too. The first one is set the table. So set out some notebooks, set out some writing utensils, and maybe even some refreshments, coffee, candy, healthy snacks, protein packs. You get the idea. Think about your audience and what kind of environment would make them feel welcome and prepare their minds for engagement. To quote the great Snickers, you are not you when you're hungry, and neither are your tabletop participants. In the same thread of being a great host, use friendly words. This is just kindness and basic sociology at work. When you're talking about tabletops, call them a discussion, an exercise, or an activity. Whatever you do, don't call it a tabletop test. Tests are evil. Nobody likes tests. It feels like I'm about to get handed a Scantron and a number 2 pencil. And to be fair, not everybody loves the word exercise either, so choose your words wisely. By framing your tabletop like a discussion, people are more likely to come prepared to discuss and less likely to hide under the conference table. Finally, use plot twists. If you've seen most reality TV shows, then you know that some of the best content comes when something unexpected happens, like Andy Richter making it to the quarterfinals on Dancing with the Stars. Talk about a plot twist, right? You can use plot twists in your tabletop exercises the same way. Some people like to call these scenario modifiers, but I think plot twist is a little more fun, subvert those expectations. So for example, if you say you're going to do a tabletop exercise on a fire at the main location, let's admit it, that sounds kind of boring. But what happens if that's only the beginning? What if the fire occurred in a different place, like in the server room instead of the marketing area? What happens if the fire happened at a different time, like at midnight instead of noon? What happens if a key employee didn't report to the evacuation location? Yikes. Thankfully, they were just on a morning coffee run, but still good to know. What if the fire inspector finds a suspicious device and you are now looking at an arson case? What if a customer shows up and needs access to her safe deposit box to get an important legal document out of it while the kind firemen are currently dousing your building in water? You get the idea, don't be afraid to introduce a little bit of orchestrated chaos into your tabletop exercise. With a little creativity and a tiny bit of magic, your tabletop exercise can be full of style and substance if you use plot twists. All right, on to our final tip of the day for leveling up your tabletop exercises. Expect the unexpected. Basically, aim for the stars, but be ready for things to catch fire in the process. Cue the spaceship montage. Did you know that space companies sometimes intentionally blow up their own rockets? I know, It sounds crazy and really, really expensive, but for engineers, seeing how things fail is incredibly valuable. Too often, we get stuck thinking that success is the only way to measure effectiveness, but that's just not true. In fact, we often learn more from our mistakes than we do from our wins. Now, I'm not saying you should be blowing up rockets every day just to test your business continuity plan, but this idea holds. Studying failures carefully can teach us things that lessons alone never will. And that's really one of the key reasons that guidance encourages us to do tabletop exercises in the first place. The FFIEC BCM booklet actually describes this expectation in detail. I'm not going to read this to you, but basically, if you're doing it right, then there will be issues that come up during your tabletop exercises. There will be things that you've never thought of before, gaps you've never seen before. The purpose of a tabletop is to make your plan better. And you can't make something better if you think it's already perfect. So what does this mean for you? Well, it means that you should expect 4 outcomes from your tabletop exercises. First, expect potential errors and imperfect results. Things will happen that your plans are not prepared for, and that's okay. In fact, that's kind of the point of the whole thing. Find the gaps before they find you. Poke, prod, not at people, but at problems. But it's not all doom and gloom. Every error or imperfect result is an opportunity to learn and fix the issues that come up. We need to be tracking our lessons learned and action items so we can make sure the underlying issues get resolved. If you have no lessons learned and no action items for at the end of your tabletop exercise, something is missing. And with that, we have covered my 5 tips for your tabletop. So just to recap, first, design a compelling scenario. You also want to gather the right team, schedule strategically, be a great host, and expect the unexpected. So before we move into the tabletop exercise, if there's one message I want to leave with you here today, it's this. Tabletop exercises are often seen as just another item on the compliance checklist, but a tabletop exercise can be a huge value add when done well. And if you can pick just 1 or 2 of these things to work on, I think you are on the right track. So if you've joined us for a webinar before, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We've still got the tabletop exercise coming, so stick around. But if you are looking for some help with planning and documenting your tabletop exercises, I would love for you to check out my company's software, Tandem. Our business continuity plan and incident management products feature a variety of scenarios and tools designed to make tabletops easy. So if you haven't seen these features before, I want to take 2 minutes, just really quick, to show you how. And even if you are a current customer, if you've used these products before, maybe I can show you something new because we've been making some really great updates lately. So for this, let's go over to the incident management product. And here under the incident response plan tab, we have a section towards the bottom called exercises and tests and scenarios. Now, our scenarios list, you can see, has a pretty wide list of scenarios, some that we've created, some that others have created, like NIST and CISA. And so what you can do is you can review one of these scenarios. One that I do want to show you today, we just published a few deepfake scenarios. We keep hearing from financial institutions, our customers, that deepfakes are a real problem. And so shout out to Savannah, our content expert who took the lead on this project. We created some really great scenarios here where you can actually walk through, here's a specific scenario and here are discussion questions. Would you consider this to be an incident? How would you detect it? And these questions go hand in hand with your incident response plan. So you should be able to find the pages, find the features and say, yes, we have covered this here. So if you want to use a scenario, you can quickly click this. I'm going to go ahead and click this copy icon. And I'm going to be able to set a scheduled date. I can assign responsibility for the scenario. I can even send reminder notifications from the software to my responsible parties ahead of time. And then this is a really cool feature that I want to show you. You can associate it with different elements. So if you want to associate it with a business process, or if you want to associate it with a certain third party, or if you want to associate it with a system or software, you can totally do that with this feature. And that is really neat because it talks across the different products. It talks with vendor management, it talks with risk assessment, it talks with BCP, all of those different things. At the bottom, you can do your lessons learned. So this is a really neat way to be able to document your scenario. You can document your exercise, and then you can easily share this information with your board, with your management, with your examiners by downloading it as part of our download documents, which are custom. You can actually tailor these documents to include only the sections that you want. So if you just want your exercises and tests, you could do that too. So lots of great features available for your exercises and tests. And if you would like to learn more about how Tandem can help you with those, you can request info on the survey whenever the session ends, or you can visit our website at tandem.app. Okay, so we are going to take just a couple quick seconds, minutes maybe, to answer some questions before we get into the tabletop exercise. And it looks like we've got a few good questions coming through here. So give me a few seconds to look at these. Love that. Mark, thank you so much for sharing. He said that he wouldn't use the word breach when talking about an organization because breach is a legally defined term. So yes, on that subject of using friendly words and using words that actually mean something, words have meanings. So we need to be careful with the terms that we describe. So thank you so much for that suggestion. He suggests calling something a data privacy incident or a cybersecurity event. So very good. Thank you so much for sharing that tip. All right, 5 to 8 participants is optimal. How do you conduct the required bank-wide exercise? That's a great question, and I would love to know more about what you mean by bank-wide. I think that tabletops can come in many flavors, many shapes and sizes. If you're looking to do a bank-wide like employee alerts test that goes to everybody, for sure, definitely do that. But if you're looking to get people around a table and talking about, is our plan adequate? Would it be functional in the event of a disaster or a business disruption or a deep fake scenario? Then that's the kind of meeting that I would recommend for having 5 to 8 participants on. So good question, good point. Love to know more about what you're doing there. Someone said Team Andy. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I would say that, except I was Team Danielle official, so that was a little heartbreaking. Next question, BCP and incident response tabletop can be one and the same. Can disaster recovery drill be the same thing or is it viewed differently? All the same. So if you can do your disaster recovery test at the same time, definitely do. In fact, I've heard a lot of people build that into their BCP exercise because restoring those IT systems, making sure that they can get back up and running is often part of that same process. So definitely make sure that you got your lessons learned documented and specific, but it's definitely feasible. Kelly, thank you so much. Did the deep fake one with the team today. It was a good one. I love that. That makes me so happy. Good to know that those are being used and helpful. Should the host of the exercise be involved in the exercise or as a spectator and record the exercise and outcomes? That's a great question, and I don't think there's any one right answer. I'd like to think of it, I'm not really a big D&D nerd. I really am not. But I've played a couple of one-shots with my friends, and sometimes, like, you know how the dungeon master or DM is the one that's plays the big baddies at the end or something, like you could be involved in that capacity, kind of more of an overseer, but also have some roles to play. So I can also see it being important to be just the facilitator, just asking questions, just creating those plot twists. So I would say define your own roles before you get into it, and then play those roles up, have a great time. And then one last question about Tandem. Why are some of the scenarios only available under BCP and some only available under incident management? That is a great question and a great observation. Basically, like we talked about earlier, some exercise and test scenarios are for your BCP, I'm going to say BCP plan, and some are for your incident response plan. And so because of the types of scenarios that those are and what they test and what the questions are about, they're designed better to focus on one area or the other as opposed to both. So that's why we've got some of those separate, but that's a setting. So if you want to include it in both places, you can definitely do that. So thank you guys so much for asking. We are going to actually move on now. Great questions. Feel free to keep those coming through. And I lost my mouse. Where did it go? There. Okay. So now I want to put these things that we've been talking about into action. So we are actually going to do a mini tabletop exercise together, or fun size, if you will. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to invite some friends on to join me for this tabletop discussion. And after I introduce them, we'll get to the scenario and discussion questions. We will chat, and you are welcome to use the Q&A panel to chat with us. Sound good? I hope so. I'm really excited. Everyone, please welcome our special guest today from Boost Consulting, David Hernandez, Missy Oliver, and Troy Sell. Y'all are welcome to turn on your mics and cameras while I introduce you. Boost Consulting is a tandem partner. They specialize in providing information security and compliance services to financial institutions. One of the services they provide is hosting tabletop exercises. And these guys, I have to tell you, they are experts. So just to do a little icebreaker and to show you what I mean, I'd like to ask each of you, what is a great tabletop exercise that you've been part of? So David, we will start with you.
One that I did just actually a few weeks ago was that the core provider who was hosted did an update and it failed, and their backups were not correcting the problem. So it led to fun discussions with operations about what are they going to do if it's down all day, and even leading into the next day. So that's what I like when it's not always on the IT side, it's on the operational side. It really stirs great discussions. So I would say
absolutely. That's a high stakes one, to be sure. Missy, what about you?
Well, I did a great one time, and it was operational and IT, and it was a loss of key personnel. And it ended up being great because as I would ask additional questions from every answer, we got all the way down to there was a particular vital role that had to be done every year, and it had gotten passed down, not written in any job description anywhere, and only one person knew that it needed to be done, and only one person knew how to do it, and only one person knew the password to get into it at all.
Oh my. Yeah.
And everybody's face in the room just kind of went, oh, but it was really great lessons learned. And
absolutely.
so, it ended up being good because it was an exercise, not a real thing.
So good. That's why we exercise these things though, right? So we find them before they are real. I love that. Troy, let's move on to you.
Okay. Recently, I worked with an organization to develop a tornado scenario, and I know what you're saying, just a old version of a tornado scenario, but this was a little different. Instead of just conducting an exercise where the building was, torn down or destroyed, it was all about communication. So we wanted to talk about impacts to communication, specifically mobile cellular communication. So we built a scenario around the fact that the cell towers in the area were destroyed. So a little different from your typical tornado scenario.
Yeah, I love that you took a traditional scenario and gave it a plot twist. When we talk about tornadoes, we talk about structures, but talking about it taking down communications is a great different perspective to have on that. All right. Thank you all so much for sharing. I always love getting to hear about your experiences with these tabletop exercises because, man, you guys hear some great things. So what we are doing here today is a fun tabletop exercise with our attendees. So we are going to get into the scenario. And here it is. You are out of the office for Thanksgiving. While you are away, someone impersonating you emails your accounts payable team. The email asks the accounts payable team to update your direct deposit account information. So this is an incredibly simple scenario, but it ticks all of the boxes. Our threat here is impersonation. Our current event is Thanksgiving, and our affected business process is accounts payable. So want to get into some questions. And remember, all of you are welcome to chat with us as well. So up first, what types of training could help address this scenario. And Troy, I'm going to ask you first, what are some of the most common forms of training that you've seen financial institutions do that could help address this?
Well, I think the most common, the most basic forms of training that we all know about are just the typical security awareness training, and that should be followed up by either social engineering or phishing test to kind of validate the training. But really above and beyond that, we're going to talk about accounts payable in this situation. So when we talk about accounts payable or wires, ACH, things like that, we're really talking about high risk transactions, personnel involved with those activities. And so I think those individuals should have a certain amount of fraud detection training to go, in their toolbox a little bit. Those would include things like trying to recognize characteristics of business email compromise, account takeover, and along with that, knowing some of the controls that you would use to combat that type of fraud. Some examples might be dual control, out-of-band communication. And so I think the business continuity management booklet really talks about training for the different roles in an organization. And so that's what I always go back to.
I love that. And I love what I heard was a lot of layered training. This is not a compliance training. This is not a one and done training. This is we need to be talking about these things regularly. We need to be validating that our training worked. And so I really love that you bring that perspective. And Missy, I actually want to ask a question of you to kind of follow up on that, is like, when we do view training as a requirement, how can we turn that into something that sticks? What are some tips that you have from your experience on how you can take that training and turn it into something meaningful?
Well, first of all, I would say that doing training on a continual basis, a little bit all the time is so much more beneficial than just one big training, which a lot of people are going to be thinking about other things and not paying attention. But make it really relevant to your particular environment. Instead of just kind of the big picture, make it things that you're seeing there, or tools that you're using there, or processes that are very interwoven, particularly to your environment, so that it becomes a little more real to everyone. And then, like I said, make it enough that it becomes just like second nature. And the more you can do top down, the more important everybody will make it, because they recognize it's important to senior leadership.
I love that. Such good tips, good practical tips. Someone in the chat said, P.S. Missy is the best. So you have some fans on the call today, just as a shout out for you. I love that. All right. Keep the chats coming. I'm seeing some good ones come in. There's one there that's really, really good, but I want to save it for later because it kind of spoils things. So stick around, hold on to your thoughts. We will come back to that. So the next question that I want to ask as part of our mini tabletop is, how would the accounts payable team recognize the request as fraudulent? So David, what are some clues and tactics that this team should have been watching for?
Well, this goes back to security awareness training, but if there's a sense of urgency in the email, this has to be done now. Or if there's just like frequency, like a lot of misspellings, or if they're signing the email differently than the way that person normally does, little things like that, or signing it by the payroll department or whatever, it's like that. There's no department like that. Stuff like that, that is the key thing. Email address is off by a letter is a key thing. I'm seeing like Microsoft now, they're using R and an N together to make an M. It looks correct in your head, but it's not. So little things like that is what you need to really look out for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should say it never ceases to surprise me how often these things just play on our like autopilot, our built-in weaknesses. I saw my dad sent me something the other day. It was like a meme that said water lemons on it, and my brain read it watermelons. And so it's just like when we're skimming something really quickly, like we don't take time to process that was not correct. And so yeah, that's a really good point, David. Lots of good points. So Missy, on the technical control side of thing, I know some people have implemented an email banner that actually alerts to outside emails. So in your experience, how successful is that?
Well, I do think it's really helpful, just like you said, when you're glancing really quickly to go through things and maybe not paying full attention, that could reach out and let you know right off the bat, oh, this is not from inside our organization. So if it says it's coming from your boss or, you know, the bank president, it's probably not. But on the other hand, you have to be careful with those because too many alerts you kind of start ignoring. So it's kind of a fine line. But in general, right now, I'm seeing that it's helpful to people.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. All right. And Missy, I shouted you out, but I have to say, David and Troy, you've got some fans in the chat as well. I'm being told you are super knowledgeable and creative with tabletops. So thank you guys so much for sharing. I love that. Okay, so we are going to move on to our third question now. Would the accounts payable team report the emails to anyone? And if so, how would they do that? So Troy, I want to ask you, if the AP team received an email like this, who should they contact first?
So I believe best case scenario, they should contact the information security officer. And you know, I'm aware, I get it, that some of our customers may not have an ISO full-time on staff. You know, all this depends on size and complexity.
Yeah.
But if not the ISO, maybe somebody in IT leadership, somebody that's going to take charge of it and probably, you know, start the process of detection and then, you know, trying to make sure it's contained.
Absolutely. And I think what you're touching on there is a really good principle for an incident response plan, is that you should have that person named, whether it's your ISO or your IT department or a supervisor or whoever that is. That name should be in your plan somewhere. So whatever you decide to do, make sure that's documented. So that's a really good point. David, in this scenario, do you think the accounts payable team should reach back out to the person who sent the email? If so, why and how?
So yes, but not by replying to the email. So like, that's number one. You have to do follow the department callback procedures, you know, that sort of thing, and verify you're calling back the number on file. And I've seen reports to where you can verify if a customer, whatever, has changed the number recently, which could be a red flag if they just change it within a month and now this is starting to happen. Things like that is what they should do. So yes, you want to verify, like, is this true? But you really need to talk to that customer. But just the email is where you can reply to that email.
Love that. Okay. That feels like a great time for a plot twist. I love me a good plot twist and PowerPoint animations I don't get to use often. So here's what we've got. Other employees have started to notice someone impersonating them as well, and they reported it to IT. How would this change your company's investigation and response? So again, feel free to type answers into the chat if you want to chat with us. For my Boost friends, though, let's say you were on the organization's IT team and all of a sudden you've got 300 reported phishing attempts. Missy, what does that tell you? And what are some steps that you would take right then?
Well, first of all, this is why it's important that everybody let someone know if something strange is happening and not just assume, oh, it's a glitch, because we tend to do that. But IT needs to know that, oh, this is happening to multiple people in multiple areas, so they can start understanding the big picture of what it is, and start, you know, looking for other common indicators that may be going on, looking for certain pathways that are going on. They're going to help them be able to quickly begin to see the scope of what's going on. So instead of just looking at one person's individual information, they're really looking for what are we seeing in commonality with all of these.
Yeah, those patterns, they tell us a lot without saying anything sometimes. So that's a really good point. David, from a technical perspective, I would say that there seems to be a lot of risk with everyone in the company getting a phishing email at the same time. So in a really extreme circumstance like this, when do you say, okay, no more email access for a bit? You've lost your privileges, quite literally.
So if I'm on the IT network admin and I'm talking and we're talking to senior staff and senior management, and we're like, okay, you know, maybe talking to the IR team, hey, this is spreading everywhere. We need to turn off the internet. I mean, the email. We just need to disable it and figure this out, because you can't trust that every employee is not going to fall for anything. It's too much of a risk. So at that point, you kind of have to turn off the email. But you have to get that approval from senior management, because this could be also bad, right? So.
Yep. And again, those we're talking about it in really generic terms, but these are escalation and elevation principles. This is what your incident response plan should define. So who needs to know what and when? All of that terminology should be in your plan. So I love that you mentioned bringing it up to other people and not just making a unilateral decision on something like that. So really, really good. All right, Troy, do you think something this widespread would be cause for a company-wide FYI communication? And if so, who would make that decision and who would be the best person to communicate it?
So Missy kind of already alluded to the fact that you're going to see patterns as these type of attacks start to develop. You may have an attack that's focused on the IT group or the security staff, possibly senior management. I do think it's worth a brief notification to maybe others in the company, making them aware of what's going on. So ongoing attempts. As far as communication goes, I think those decisions are best made in advance of the situation.
Yeah.
So if I were doing that, I would say document a checklist, put it into a procedure. And so that way you identify ahead of time who decides, who communicates. I think to back up that process a little bit, I think notification templates for various kinds of scenarios, those are good to have developed before the incident happens.
Absolutely. I love that. Communication templates are such a big deal. That way you don't have to spend brain power or time working on it in the middle of this incident. You can actually just pull up what you've previously decided. And I think that's really the big benefit of having an incident response plan, is not having to make those decisions in the moment. So that is really good. Okay, we've got one more quick plot twist, and I say quick because we are running out of time, but this is a really interesting topic, so I want to visit about it. All of the direct deposit changes have been made by one person. How would this change your company's investigation and response? And this is a really broad question. If we spot a pattern like this, we tend to believe the best and presume the worst all at the same time, right? This is everything from poor Sally just didn't know to we've got a bit of an insider threat problem, right? So what do you do? David, I'm going to ask you, from a functional perspective, if you found out that someone was making these direct deposit changes, it seems like one of your first steps would be to try and change everything back as quickly as possible. But what are the pros and cons of this?
So before you even make any changes, like I'm telling like IT, we need to disable their core access and disable their domain access first. I don't want them doing anything anymore. Stop all of that. And then you've got to look at logs to confirm that this person's doing it, and then every piece of evidence you find has to be maintained, keep all that document, because you can't just go to them, why are you doing this? You have to show proof. And then you're probably going to meet with HR and then show HR the proof that this person is doing that. So that's why you don't want to make any changes right away. But if you stop their access, okay, at least you're stopping the damage. Yeah. That's what I would do first.
Absolutely. Contain, contain, contain. So Troy, if you saw the signs of a mass direct deposit change, would you be inclined to believe this is just an accident, or would you treat this as an insider threat at this point?
Yeah, I go back to the philosophy of being prepared ahead of time. So I think any responses should be based on policy or specific incident action plans, and those should be customized, developed way in advance of any type of incident. So I think they should include things like, maybe in this case, a prearranged number of changes. If you reach that threshold, we're going to do a deeper dive on investigation. If you exceed certain dollar thresholds that should be documented, then we're going to, do more investigation because of that.
Absolutely. So knowing what's normal and helps you know what's abnormal. So that's a really good point.
Have some baselines in place. Yeah.
Yep. All right. And Missy, who are some other people you'd want to engage at this point?
Well, and you probably should have already engaged, but insurance can be such a great tool. they have oftentimes forensic investigators, but they have other tools that are wonderful to assist you. And then also, you know, you're going to want to contact probably at some point very quickly a regulator. You might want to contact your Corps, and then probably some kind of law enforcement. Again, at a point where that's already been determined, when do we bring in outside law enforcement? And there's times it might need to be the FBI or someone like that, or times that it might need to be local law enforcement. But I would always start with your insurance.
Yep. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I want to just take a second to go through some of the chats that we've had. There's several good controls that have been listed in here. But one that came up was, I can update my own direct deposit information. So that kind of removes the person from the scenario entirely. And if that is the case, then the answer is, I can't do that for you, but you can do it yourself. So I really love that preventive thinking, that a proactive approach to this problem. And that's really another benefit of doing these tabletop exercises, is you could have a conversation like that. Like, this wouldn't even be a problem for us. I know when we were talking about this, Conetrix has some technology implemented that prevents emails from spoofing internal email addresses in place. And so we can't even get email addresses from, we'll say, my own personal email address to someone else. And so there are really great technical tools out there that you can use to implement, and really cool things you can be doing with your email monitoring systems. So rather than shutting down email entirely, you could just pick and choose to block certain things, or you could turn off certain areas instead of the whole thing. So as technology continues to improve, like, those are things that we should be considering as well. And I love, love, love all of the feedback that we've gotten. So thank you so much for sharing on that. Okay. So much good discussion. Thank you all of you, so much for sharing, for the insights, and for the great conversation. Every good tabletop exercise needs lessons learned and some action plans. So that's what we've got here. And I'd love to do 3 takeaways from today. Let's do one each. So, and I'm going to be doing this live, so please bear with my typing skills. But Missy, why don't you start us off? What is your lesson learned or your takeaway today?
I think one of them would be, if you see something, say something. If something is strange to you or doesn't look right, let somebody know that you see a problem going on. That leaves a much better chance that, you know, maybe they look at it and say, no, it's fine. But maybe they look at it and say, yeah, this is weird, and somebody else also mentioned this. So don't just think it's an anomaly. Go ahead and let them know.
Yep. I love that. Let them know. Okay, lesson number 2. Troy, let's come to you.
I would say be prepared before the incident happens.
Okay. Anything you want to elaborate on that, or are you just gonna mic drop right there?
Dropped it.
I know we're
Perfect.
short on time, so.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And David, why don't you bring us on home?
All right, so something with lessons learned, action plans. It's all great to have action plans and all these lessons learned meetings, but if nobody is assigned to follow up and that these action plans are going to be implemented 6 months down the line after the tabletop, then they're not helpful. So make sure you assign someone to follow up on action plans.
Love that. Okay, David, I'm going to assign you to do that.
Yeah, and to Missy's point, make sure David's involved in the tabletop.
Absolutely, so much. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been so much fun, and I just really want to thank all of you for participating. This has been a great time. So big thank you to Boost Consulting for joining us today. You all can go ahead and turn off your cameras and mics. So we'll see you guys later. All right, as I mentioned, Boost provides consulting services, including virtual information security officer or VISO consulting on retainer, like for BCP or incident response tabletops, and they also do tandem workshops. So if you want a deeper dive into how the software can work for you, that is a great option. So if you'd like to learn more about Boost Consulting and how these awesome people can help you, you can visit conetrix.com/boost. As I mentioned early on, Tandem is a cybersecurity GRC software suite designed specifically to help organizations like yours. So if you are a current Tandem subscriber, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are the reason that we get to do free consulting webinars like this. And if you are not a Tandem subscriber, welcome. I'm glad you're here, and I'd love to get to show you more of what Tandem can do. And on that note, we are giving away a free hat to anyone who fills out the survey today and schedules a sales meeting. So I even brought one with me today, and I just want to show you how awesome these hats are. So they are super cool and super trendy, and I'm even going to go with the side look for today. It says cyber on it, and it's upside down and backwards, so they can look really great with your hair. And I'd love for you to get one so we can match. So fill out the survey, schedule that sales meeting, get a cool hat, and be awesome. So we really value your feedback. So when you fill out that survey, you'll also be entered for a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. And if you enjoyed this session, I would love for you to join us at next year's Tandem Keys Conference happening April 7th through 9th in Lubbock, Texas. With Keys, you can look forward to a great lineup of speakers, tons of engaging learning opportunities, and the chance to connect with others in the cybersecurity community. And I hear rumors of a live interactive BCP tabletop exercise happening. Spoiler alert, it's not a rumor, it's true. It's on the agenda, and you should definitely join us for it. So if you'd like to learn more about Keys, you can see us on our website at tandem.app/keys. And spaces are limited this year. We are already over halfway to capacity, so don't wait too long to register. I will hope to see you there. And with that, I think we will call it a day. Thank you all so much for joining us. Don't forget to fill out that survey when you leave. I hope this session has been helpful for you. I hope to see you around. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving and that you have a blessed day. We'll see you later.